Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us. My name is Annette Fetchko, and I'm the Executive Director for Bethlehem Haven here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'd also like to introduce my esteemed panelists for our discussion this afternoon. 50 is the new 75, aging of the homeless population. I'm honored to be on this panel with Matri Johnson and Marcella Kennard. And I'll let them introduce themselves briefly and tell you what organizations that they're with.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Matri, and I'm with Home of the Sparrow.
Good afternoon. I'm Marcella Kennard. I am with the Bell Family Shelter in York, PA.
All right, again, thank you, everyone. We're going to move through a very brief conversational set of slides, and then we would absolutely welcome any questions. So let's begin. So really what we wanted when we sat down as a panel to talk about our really discussion and conversation this afternoon, this is really not a new conversation as we began to really talk about it. And everything old is new again. And what do we mean by that? We mean this is really a public health crisis, housing shortage, homelessness. And, it's been a public health crisis for many, many years. And many of us will remember the 2008 economic downturn. Many vulnerable individuals, middle age, kind of reaching towards kind of planning for retirement. Because of that economic downturn, they were particularly at risk for evictions, utility shutoffs, unemployment that they were not able to really recover from. So what is new? What's new is we're now dealing with an aging population that went through this 2008 downturn. Many of them didn't recover. There are many new individuals within the aging population that are adding to an already extremely strain on the housing shortage, nationally, regionally, and locally. So we really feel that this is not a new crisis. It's really an escalating epidemic that's just been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope that as we move through our conversation, we can all recognize that this is a systemic public health crisis that I think we have the ability to come together to address and begin to close that gap. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bethlehem Haven and the work that we do here in Pittsburgh. So the mission for Bethlehem Haven is to really provide a continuum of care for homeless individuals that really leads towards self-sufficiency. That's really our goal. We believe the women that we're privileged to serve are empowered, but how do we really use that empowerment to move them to self-sufficiency? Our vision is to really end homelessness, and we want to do that through collaboration with the community and the people that we serve. What's our history? We have 2021, we will celebrate 40 years of a rich history of serving homeless women in our community. And it began in 1981 when Bethlehem Haven was founded in the basement of the Smithfield Church here in downtown Pittsburgh. And it was truly in response to the ever-growing need for emergency housing for homeless women. There was a lot of housing for homeless men, no housing for homeless women. Thus, Bethlehem Haven was born. What are the programs we provide? We provide emergency shelter, permanent supportive housing, safe at home program, and medical respite. What I want to share just briefly is our safe at home program, which really begins to address homeless women who are aging through the system, who find themselves at risk for homelessness. So it really is a preventative program. And I think one of the very few preventative programs that financially support women on the verge of homelessness. The population, as I mentioned, is women over the age of 50 or women with young children in the household. In 2019, we were privileged to serve more than 2,000 women and help them maintain their housing and households. In 2020, we just completed statistics that we served over 3,500 women, and we're in 2021, we're expecting to almost double that to over 5,000 women maintain housing and households. So the demand keeps growing, the need is ever growing, and we try to really collaborate as community providers and stakeholders to close that need. With that, I would like to turn it over to Matry to talk about Home of the Sparrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. So as you can see, Home of the Sparrow, our mission is to partner with women facing homelessness to secure housing and achieve long-term stability, chart new paths for their future. How we do this is we have 6 programs. Our first program is the eviction prevention. This program provides one-time assistance to single mothers and single women ages 18 all the way up to 90 something. It's designed just to help that one time to prevent evictions or to prevent them from becoming homeless. Our second program, which is probably one of our largest, is the supportive housing program. This program is also for single women and single mothers living in Chester County that are working. We provide ongoing supports, and we do that in exchange for, we also provide rental assistance. So we meet with the mothers or the single women twice a month to do budgeting, life skills. The whole goal is how do we keep you stably housed? And how do we help you not just survive, but to thrive? The third program is our shared housing program, which is probably one of the most innovative programs. It has been in existence for over 25 years. And this is a program where we're seeing the large percentage of the women we serve are women over the age of 50. It's another way that we can prevent them from becoming homeless. But it's also a way that we see for women that are low wage earners, or if they have some other disability that they cannot work, they are receiving an income. Shared housing is a great option for them. The fourth program is our pre-senior housing. This program started probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Once again, it's another option for women that are 50 and above. This is for single women that are working, but they do not have to be working full-time. They can work part-time. We have 2 houses. One house is communal living, where we can house up to 5 women. And the second house is actually apartments. So we have 4 one-bedroom apartments and 1 2-bedroom. This program, once again, is for women that are 50 and above. Once again, it's preventing them from becoming homeless, so they can move into that. Our 5th program is our RAP program. This is a partnership we do with the Chester County Adult Probation and Parole, where we're assisting women that are reentering the community with supportive services, housing, advocacy, all of that. And our last program is our graduate outreach. So once a person finishes with a program, we don't just say goodbye, good luck. It's how do we continue to support you? Because we know that once you go through the program, things don't just magically become better. A lot of times you will constantly hit some bumps in the road, and we're here to support. That's our 6 programs, and thank you, Annette.
You're welcome. Marcella, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about your program.
I almost forgot to unmute. Thank you. So Bell Socialization Services has been around for over 50 years, and there are several different departments of Bell. We have an IDD department, a mental health department, but I'm going to focus on our shelter department, which is under Bell Family Shelter. So our agency mission, Bell provides an environment of support and empowerment where people can improve their quality of living. And that is our mission across the board. The vision for the Bell Family Shelter is to provide and incorporate a person-first method of approach to empower our homeless population, providing necessary resources in-house and networking with community supports to aid families and individuals towards self-preservation and independence. In our history, in operation since 1986, we have served more than 20,000 individuals to date, providing immediate respite to those who have slept in cars and on the street in doubled up situations. We have our couch surfers and who go from place to place. We serve them who have been evicted from dilapidated housing conditions, discharged from prison, family and friends evictions, landlord evictions, etc. So everything under the umbrella that we all see in homeless population. Our programs, we have 4 programs under our shelter umbrella. The emergency shelter is our 30-day emergency shelter. Um, uh, we have an extension of that, which is our Bell Bridge Housing Program, which is transitional housing. We have 8 scattered site units that are furnished and where case managers go into the home, provide services on more of a long-term basis. Um, we have a program called Possibilities and Next Step, which are primarily referred, clients in that program are primarily referred by children, youth, and service and families. So they're more um, families with more extensive needs. They may have some drug and alcohol issues. There may be um, there's concerns with the children, but those families that we support there are in a longer term programs with much more supports. So those are the programs that we have under Bell Family Shelter.
Thank you, Marcella.
Mhm. So I'm going to talk about the chunky shoe journey. So we all heard the old cliche, walk a mile in my shoes. And so when I thought about that, and I've heard that being said over the years, um, it made me question um, the many times where we work through failures with individuals. Failure after failure can't get folks to complete the simplest of tasks, whether it was meeting a caseworker to get information because you want to see them be successful, whether it was uh, or just completing the program requirements. And so it caused me to think about some of the things that we have wrapped up in our tiny little program guidelines and regulations. We want people to fit and we want them to conform and do and comply. And with things that we seem, oh, well, I don't know what the problem is. Meet with the caseworker, you'll get your information, you'll be, we want to move you forward. But this journey that we see in a population of people cannot be um, cannot be identified. We can't identify each individual, each family the same. So the chunky shoe journey really is a concept of looking at a person first. And we may deal with folks that have been abused, um, and they have so many triggers with that. And that caseworker could be a male. So you have this older woman who's been in a long time relationship of that was dysfunctional. And now we're saying, you got to meet with this male caseworker. And she never shows up for meetings. And so you're contemplating, do I terminate this person? She's not active. But the chunky shoe journey really is understanding where someone's at and meeting them where they're at. So building a relationship comes into play, learning about that person's disability or life experiences may help a person to just open up, and we found with this particular person I'm thinking about, because she was abused, she didn't want to meet with a male. Now she was okay with talking to him on the phone, so we had to change our rules around a little bit. She was able to make phone calls and get the program services from the caseworker and was okay with signing the paperwork with a female staff when she came in at before curfew. So her journey couldn't really fit with our program guidelines. It didn't allow her to do what we wanted her to do. We see this in within the homeless population, 50 and older. You have women who may have lost their jobs out in the community who are business women, and they've come into contact with a lot of people. So now we have someone who's up early and wanting to leave the shelter before curfew. No one goes out before 6 a.m. And now we have this person who wants to leave out before 6 a.m. and they come back before curfew, and we're wondering why we can't service her in meetings in-house. What is her issue? And so we have to dig a little bit and we find out what her journey is, why we can't get her to do what we need her to do. And so the chunky shoe journey just really is a thought process and making you go, pausing and figuring out how can we better serve someone who's not complying, so to speak, who doesn't want to conform to what your program design is. So with this particular person who's leaving out early, professional, has a job, who's been in the professional realm, you come to find out that was the reason. She's been in contact with so many people. She's served people in the community. And now she's middle aged. She has no supports, um, regaining employment or searching for employment, and doesn't want to be embarrassed or shamed by others in the community. So this is so servicing her has to play out a little differently. So she can call in and be serviced over the phone. She can be signed paperwork when she comes in at the end of the day, and just making some simple changes to help her journey become successful is a way of thinking that we many have never even considered. And as a director, and you working with case managers, it's very frustrating to not know how to service somebody. So figuring out the whole cliche, walk a mile in my shoes, when someone says that to you, what they're really saying to you is, I need you to listen and understand what my disabilities are, what my hangups are, what my barriers have been, why I cannot conform to do things this way. It makes me uncomfortable. My upbringing doesn't allow me to face shame the way I should, or there's so many different dynamics that come into play. And so when someone says that, it screams volumes. Walk a mile in my shoes. You don't understand, and I need you to listen. I want you to understand. I want to be successful. And this is the message we get from from clients day in and day out. And it's so important to realize their shoes that they're walking, the journey that they've taken at 50, there's 50 miles in the making that we will never understand. But we can chip at, open up, relax, and learn, and to find ways to better serve the folks that we are serving in order for them to be successful. Not every journey is going to be the same. Some people are going to fumble over a few things before you realize the best ways to help them, and some are going to be successful and be able to walk that journey just the way you planned it out for them. Because sometimes as workers, direct.
You're on mute.
Okay, it shouldn't be now.
No,
So sometimes, yeah, okay, so sometimes when we just listen, and we can know better how to serve folks.
thank you, Marcella.
You're welcome.
So, Marcella, you really talked a lot about this philosophy of cares for you versus cares about you. Matri, Marcella, and myself, we've had a lot of conversation around, really what is our role as leaders in helping to move individuals through a continuum that stabilizes and moves them to self-sufficiency. And what does that look like? And is it really a check the box? Or is it really more kind of understanding and meeting this individual where they are? So, Matri and Marcella, I don't know if you have any, additional comments around this philosophy that, we believe was important to share with our participants today around the kind of that chunky shoe journey.
Yes, I will add, you know, sometimes it is a loss of jobs that can put a middle-aged person into our homeless sector for services, or losing a house because financial support abandons you. Um, a loss of sense of pride. But for single female women, um, they're really looking for that second half of their life to be um, better than the first. And their journeys have been such that they really just want um, respect, dignity back into their lives. Some have just, grown up, so to speak, and have moved away from abusive situations, or some have taken on more than they could handle financially by raising grandchildren. So many things have come into play with this middle-aged population. Health is a very big concern. Had a woman come through the shelter. Um, she was 50 some years old. She had grandchildren with her. She lost her job because she was tired all the time, sick all the time, didn't know, just felt like it was just stress, didn't really know what was going on with her. After dinner in the shelter, she would go to sleep. She was sometimes hard to wake up in the morning. And it just dawned on me, I've seen this before. Could it be diabetes? But we happen to have testing equipment here at our shelter. So we tested her. And lo and behold, this woman learned that day that she was diabetic. Her sugars were in the 400s. And it just, to her, I mean, she cried, but she was also happy because she knew that there wasn't a reason to why she was feeling like she was falling apart and couldn't make it. And so after losing a job, losing a house, she really was able to identify some real serious issues and was able to address them, and did become successful after her stay here at the shelter. So when we care about somebody, we c- we we can care for them or we can care about them, and they know the difference. When you care for them, you may just provide some information and move on to the next. But when you take the time to really learn about someone's situation, how you can really help to benefit them, learning about what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their capabilities are, and then implementing the goals accordingly, you're you're going to be much more successful in helping that person to become successful, um, rather than just assigning duties to them, because it just may be just like another assignment duty to them, and they can fail if you don't know what the handicaps are, what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are. So relationships have to be built, and that could be sometimes difficult for families, individuals who have lost, they're coming from fractured relationships with families. They're dealing with embarrassment and as if they did something wrong and don't understand how they got to where they are just from being abused. And so the sense of failure is real, and how we approach our the people in this population, we could can either make or break their success.
Thank you. Matri, I think you have a great story about the car story, right? That you wanted to share around kind of this concept of, really cares for you versus cares about you. Can you share that with us?
I can. So we have a woman that was experiencing homelessness, looking for employment because she had been downsized and had some other challenges, some mental health, et cetera. And in doing all of this, when you're starting to work on a plan of action for them or a roadmap, one of the biggest challenges we knew was it would be this car. But the one thing when you're looking at people differently, and how we've talked about is seeing everyone as an individual and not doing this whole group dynamic, we realized that this car was everything for her. Even though the car we could see was a burden, for her, that car was everything. It was an older model, luxury car, but it was everything. So one of the biggest discussions was, Do you tell her to give up her car? And because that was the way that we saw it. Or do we go from that strength-based perspective, which is, okay, this car means everything. It's back to that chunky shoe. We're not in her shoes. We need to step out of it, but how do we provide supports with her and this car? And I think that's something we all see when we start talking about the cares for you versus the cares about you and the chunky shoe. We have to take ourselves out of it, what we're used to doing, what we're used to figuring it out, and saying, how do we support you in what you want to do and what matters to you? And that's what we had to do with the car. She still has the car. She's maneuvering it around, but it gives her a sense of dignity. And I think you had talked about that, Marcella, your dignity. We have to respect the dignity and humanity.
It's what's important to that individual, right? It goes back to this philosophy of meeting people where they are. What we may think is most important is not at all what's most important to that individual. And until we listen and understand what's most important to them and help work through that, we're never going to be able to then help and support them with other areas that can move them towards self-sufficiency. So these are, I think, hopefully, this conversation really helps all of us understand really kind of our philosophy of really how we view and how we engage individuals that we're privileged to serve. So thank you. So we've talked a little bit about each of these, philosophies or pillars, but we wanted to really share with you kind of our philosophy of program services. And the foundation of that is really harm reduction. And that is truly meeting people where they are, understanding them, who they are as individuals, their journey. So it really leads to listening, just listening. Tell me your story, just listen. I'm not going to be checking off boxes. I'm not going to be, saying this is what you need to fulfill, some type of a funding requirement, but just tell me your story and assess what those needs are. And let's together figure out what ones are most important as we kind of learn from the stories from our other Matri and Marcella. And then from that, let's really build a care plan that we can agree on together, that we're going to work on together. And that really leads to relationship building, right? And we know in our lives, life is a series of relationships, professional, personal, and many of the individuals that we're privileged to serve come from such fractured and dysfunctional relationships, trauma, abusive situations, very acute situations that we talked about where they may have had really stable environments for most of their lives. And now all of a sudden, because of a life event that occurred, find themselves on the verge of eviction or having lost their homes and now present in an environment like an emergency shelter. And that's very traumatizing to these individuals, as we talked about. But if we're able to really build upon these kind of pillars in the philosophy of our kind of program and services, we really do believe that we can help move individuals to a level of self-sufficiency. And these individual care plans will determine the level of success. We oftentimes talk about failure, but we need to talk about success. And what does success look like for these individuals? So I would also ask Marcella and Matri to also comment really on kind of our building blocks and pillars of our philosophical approach to program and services.
Right. So listening, just like to add to that is that, just like someone saying, walk a mile in my shoes, there's a time to listen and a time to learn, to try to walk in someone's shoes, no matter how chunky, no matter how rigid, dark, ugly that it may be. There are miles and miles of stuff that people have with them. And to really truly understand them, the biggest part is listening. So we have the ability to learn when we listen. When we listen, we accurately receive and interpret the messages appropriately. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. And that's one thing that we don't want to do. We don't want to misguide or misdirect someone or or make a task more difficult when they're already stressed and dealing with low self-esteem and or battered, socially abused, or whatever their situations may be. We really want to meet the people right where they are, to address those areas.
Thank you. Matri?
So I just want to kind of piggyback off of the care plan. And what I would say is that we all know a care plan is unique to each individual person. It's like having designer clothes versus a knockoff. Every person, it's their own individual designer wear. And when you're doing a care plan for that person, they're really the architect for their care plan. So they're driving the bus, they're talking about what's important for them. And once again, it's building on those other building blocks, the harm reduction, meaning they're person-centered first. We're taking into consideration their life experience, what is important to them, and it's that listening. So we listened to what they had to say, then we're helping them. So we're not driving the bus, they're driving the bus. This is their roadmap. This is their action plan. Because if we create it, they're probably not going to follow it. But if they create, they will be invested.
That's really great perspectives. Thank you. So we thought it would be beneficial just to have a brief discussion on what does harm reduction really mean. I know that we know that there have been a few other sessions with regard to the conference around harm reduction, but we thought maybe we'll just kind of share conversationally what we define as harm reduction. And we know that there's no universally accepted definition of harm reduction. What we believe harm reduction is, as we've mentioned throughout kind of our conversation this afternoon, is really meeting people where they are, without judgment, without stigma, and really listening and learning, I think, as Marcella and Matri commented. We also firmly believe that harm reduction is really grounded in social justice and human rights. And we're hearing a lot about social justice and human rights. And if we fundamentally believe that how we treat people should be based on how we would want to be treated, and the pillars of listening and understanding what's most important and the stories behind these individuals, then we strongly believe that it will be rooted in social justice and human rights advocacy. And historically, as we all know, harm reduction has referred to policy programs and practices, aimed to minimize health, social, and legal impacts associated with drug use, policies, and laws. We are here to really challenge ourselves. Harm reduction is really a universal concept that can be applied to all aspects of our interactions with individuals personally and professionally. But primarily, we're really here to talk about it in terms of our programs that we're trying to really, I think, pivot to more broadly support the aging population that is experiencing homelessness or at risk for homelessness. And really today, as we talk about harm reduction, it really focuses on positive change and partnering and working and supporting with individuals, as we've talked about, without judgment, without any coercion, and certainly without discrimination. So that we really just kind of wanted to give you sort of that foundation. But the principles of harm reduction, I think we've all just talked about this, meeting people where they are, no judgment, avoidance of stigma, the commitment to a social justice platform, and then respecting the basic human rights of people and really understanding that this is really just a public health approach, that we're really very much public facing into the community, trying to really work with our community partners to really solve for what has historically been an epidemic, and that is lack of affordable and accessible housing. It's not a new problem, as we said. It really has been a public health crisis for many, many years. I will pause there and ask if my panelists, Matri and Marcella, have any additional comments really around harm reduction.
Marcella, did you want to go or I can go?
You can go, Maitri.
All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about when I think about harm reduction of a woman that we are working with right now, that she meets so many of these, the different check boxes. She's middle 50s, single woman, severe mental health in the past, drug and alcohol, involved in the justice system, and she's been experiencing homelessness. And working with her, it truly is, you have to meet her where she is. So we cannot say, okay, you need to take care of this, this, that. And she has a cat, I need to add that. Whenever you have a pet added to the mix, that always changes things. And for her, it's that whole piece of this cat is everything. I know I have all these other issues, but how do we successfully meet her where she is, not judge her for all of the past that has happened, and how do we help her to get stably housed, and what does that look like for her? So I think that's what the principles, when I think of it, it's truly, once again, meeting them where they are. How do we help them? So we're walking alongside them, but once again, they're driving that bus. But that's what I think about when I think about harm reduction and the principles of it.
Thank you. Marcella, anything to add?
No, I think you covered most of all my thoughts.
Great. So one of the things when the three of us were really talking about our conversational presentation this afternoon was, we talk about these concepts, but are we really giving individuals the tools that they need to really be able to live, these kind of philosophies about harm reduction? And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the toolboxes that we're building within, our colleagues within our organizations, and then also engaging in conversations with our community partners around how do we give individuals the resources and tools that they need to really be able to embrace a harm reduction model and approach. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these. And I would ask Maitri, if you want to start talking about a few of them, and then Marcella, I'll turn it over to you, and then I can just finish up.
So I'll start with the one on top, which is the trauma-informed care. I'm sure all of us have heard about being trauma-aware, trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive. And I'll speak as far as our agency, we are all trauma-aware and trauma-informed, and we come from that approach. We actually do the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, on anyone that's entering through our shared, our supportive, or our pre-senior program. We also do a mood screening, but it doesn't mean anything to do those screenings and you don't back it up. So we also have two counselors that we work with that are there to work with our women and our families for free. So the trauma-informed care really impacts how we work with our families, and it also impacts, especially for women over 50. I think Marcella brought this up, which is there is a whole history that has occurred, 50 plus years. And a lot of those 50 plus years involve trauma. So we have to take that into consideration and really look at how we're going to work with that family because they have had the trauma. So that's one of the things that we're really big on. And the other one I'll probably just mention a little bit is the motivational interviewing. Critical. I think once again, most of us in social services, we've heard about motivational interviewing, but it is so critical because it changes how we work with families. The whole point of motivational interviewing is about engaging, focusing, and once again, listening and non-judgment. So it's that time where when a person's talking to you, the old way is we would write notes and everything. The new way with motivational interviewing, you're listening, you're present, you're engaging, and you're doing the reflective listening. And you're asking those open-ended questions. So we really practice that as well, because everyone wants to feel like they're cared about and that they matter.
Thank you. Marcella, do you want to comment on a few of the tools that we're recommending be in everyone's toolbox?
Absolutely. So I would like to start with cultural humility. And to me, cultural humility starts with you, the individual, the worker. When you first understand who you are, your culture, your beliefs, your family dynamics you've been accustomed to, you then know what you bring into the workplace. So culture humility, the reality is it's a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique. As we are learning about others, cultures, beliefs, and culture identities, you need to realize who you are and where you come from and what your core values are yourself. Culture humility can increase the ability to see from each other's viewpoints, understanding each other's backgrounds, and ultimately providing quality service to others, and to realizing that all people are different. Um, Sometimes accepting cultural humility is to be open, or it is the absence of fear. So if you're not open to different cultures, um, the humility comes in is by being accepting and not being fearful of the unknown. And the responsibility we have as employees, as workers in the human service field, is to educate ourselves on different aspects of culture, history, knowing about specific beliefs or events in history, and knowing what affects different populations of people culturally. Um, Homelessness, we some people say, is a culture within itself, but each family, each individual you're dealing with comes from a specific culture themselves. So having the humility to it is providing the most quality service you can to that person and not be reserved by the unknown of who they are, what they're bringing to the table, and what their capabilities are. So that person concept just ties right into culture humility and just meeting people where they are, no matter what their backgrounds, no matter what um, they call themselves or represent. Some of the difficulties we have can sometimes we realize come from our own upbringing and our own understanding of things. So being open and providing um, a quality service to them and respecting them for who they are and where they're at. So that kind of ties me into really just relationship-based care. Um, to build a relation with others, an older population, it really does take a combination of soft skills, listening, building trust. Those are the essentials for those suffering loss. They are essential because reassuring that I'm here to serve you. Um, and I know that clients know the difference. They so know the difference when you yourself, when we go to the doctors and the doctor gives us a prescription and sends us on our way and doesn't give us the time to really hear about your concerns. And you'll go home, you're not feeling any better. You didn't really feel like you had the opportunity to express everything that was going on with you, but here you have this mess and it's not doing anything for you. Well, the doctor did care for you, but he didn't care about you. He didn't take the time to figure out what the real issue was to make the best, to give the best proper care to you. And just like we know that feeling, a client knows whether you care for them or you're caring about them. Um, so we have to be cautious in how we um, deal with our clients, our clientele. They do know whether we're pushing them through or we really care about their situation, and we're going to take our time to help resolve the things that they're bringing to the table. So that whether it's taking the time to help them place a call or committing to help them, build a trust with them, let them know that you're going to go to bat with them, um, and their relationship, that individual is important. The losses that they have suffered are immeasurable to us, and we can't go back 50 years on a person's life, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. Here in our shelter, we've seen a lot of high 60s and 70-year-olds in the last year, and that's a lot of baggage. And they do know whether you care about them or whether you care for them. And it is instrumental in the families and those individuals being successful.
Thank you. I just would like to quickly comment. We've
You're
talked a lot about harm reduction, and that really is wrapped up, I think, in all of the tools in our recommended toolbox. And that really is meeting people where they are, treating them with dignity and respect. And a very simplistic approach to harm reduction is with every individual, keeping them safe and minimizing risk. Excuse me. So I think that's very important. And then the last piece is really assessment. You know, what's going on in that individual's, excuse me, all of a sudden, what's going on in that individual's life? What are those social drivers? And it's what we're talking about. Homelessness, you know, relationships, financial strains, whatever it may be that that individual is dealing with. So it really is the physical, the behavioral, and kind of social assessments that we need to do and how they really come together. So in the few minutes that we have before we'd like to open it up to any questions in the chat room, we really would like to do a call to action. And that is really beginning to understand how together we can bridge the physical, the behavioral health, and the social determinants or drivers of the individuals we're privileged to serve. And how we can come together as human services, community partners to really say, let's break down our silos a little bit and talk about how we can effectively build continuum of care models to effectively address these drivers so that we really are moving individuals to sustainable bridges, you know, to kind of bringing them and moving them towards that level of self-sufficiency, again, whatever that may be. And the three of us are committed to saying, if there's anybody in our participant, you know, panel discussion this afternoon that would want to come together with us, we would love to continue this conversation. And we would love to do it in a forum that's hopefully we can formalize. So we were pretty excited when we started to get together and really talk about what the opportunities were. So we really wanted to end, you know, our discussion this afternoon with a call to action. And then lastly, Marcella and Matri, I'll turn it over to you for kind of our closing comments.
The beauty of walking it out, finding out a person's strengths and providing them with the appropriate resources, because you've taken the time to make them first, and you've listened to what the barriers are, and you've had to think outside the box and do things a little bit differently than your program outlined, designed it to be. But then the journey of that person comes into fruition, and oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see a person walking taller, a person whose countenance has been lifted, and they're successful in becoming a productive part of our society. Um, their journey was so long and full of so many things, and we don't always get to chisel at everything, but we can make those connections and at least fill in a few of the puzzle pieces, and make their walk a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter, um, because we feel we've brought them to a place where they have security and independence and housing and supports. And you took the time to know, to let them know that they were valued and they were always important and they always will be. So that journey is always, it's a thing after 29 years, I must say, almost 29 years in the field, um, just elates me when we can fill in the pieces and we can support a person and see their whole life coming to fruition, at least a roof over their head and a fresh start with the right supports. And it's a beautiful thing, just like those shoes, a beautiful thing.
I would
Nature.
just piggyback off of what Marcella said. Um, I think the beautiful thing is when we see women that are in their second half of their lives and still moving forward, and especially when a woman has experienced homelessness, has been through a lot of trauma and different challenges. But when they finally become securely housed, they're stable, they're doing what they need to do to move forward. That is one of the most gratifying, and that's what I think we all want to see. We want to see people to flourish and to maintain and to really do better in that second half.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we'll be able to take some questions. Oh, okay. Well, no questions have been submitted. Either we did a really wonderful job, ladies and participants, or I don't know. So we'll wait maybe a minute or two. We have until 2 o'clock. It's 1:52 in case anybody does have any questions. Okay. Well, again, I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, and I'd also like to thank the participants on the session today. We were really privileged to be a part of the conference, and we hope to hopefully hear from some of you. Oh, a question came in to hear from all of you in terms of our call for action. So Steph, if we could find out the question. Okay, the question is, um, I see increasing participation from behavioral healthcare providers in the space of the total health of the individual, specifically through the introduction of key players like BCMs. How do we invite physical health providers into the space? So I think that that's a great question. I can certainly ask Marcella and Maitri to comment.
I know here at our shelter, the healthcare, the behavioral healthcare, and our local hospital have been very instrumental. They've partnered with us. So the behavior health is a big support as well. We are able to refer, make those connections for folks, and they get them in sooner to for assessments, for ongoing care beyond our shelter services. The health wise, we have a partnership with Wellspan. We can take folks in from that they're referring into our shelter. They have nurse care that will follow up with people with severe mental health issues. If they're discharged from the prison setting with mental health issues, our WellSpan connects and follows through with it with certain individuals from that regard as well. So those relationships have really been a strength for a lot of our supports that we're able to provide to families and individuals here at our shelter. Um, Without that, we it's hard to help a person to maintain in our shelter because we are a family shelter, so we have a lot of children on deck. we do get a lot of single women, but we have almost half of who we have here are children as well. So we want to be able to service our older population, single population of women, um, in the most healthy environment for everyone. So those supports really are very helpful in helping them to be successful in their 30-day stay. Um, I think there is a willingness to with part- particular behavioral health services that are willing to partner, especially with COVID and other issues that have been, we've seen an increase in the need for therapy, the need for dealing with issues that have been surmounted just so much more over the past year. So though I would say if you're in a position to look into partnerships, I think you should have the conversation because it's very instrumental in helping you to service those individuals and also to help them to be successful.
So I'll just comment quickly. One of the things we started to do here within Allegheny County, and it's certainly been supported by our new director of the health department, which is really a public health organization for the communities that we serve, is to start to really engage in what I would call cross-sector forums or conversations. So we brought together, cross-sector stakeholders that represented physical, behavioral, social, and human services organizations to begin to really talk about how do we, first of all, identify the gaps or the needs in the provision along a continuum of care for homeless individuals. And then how can we really talk about how do we break down the silos and start to build the bridges across the services that we provide so we have warm handoffs. So when an individual is discharged from an inpatient setting, for example, and they're homeless, how do we make sure that they're connected to temporary or transitional housing, and how do we get them connected to the wraparound services such as social service agencies, housing agencies? How do we continue to engage them with the physical health if they need behavioral health? So we really started those collaborative conversations. And then specifically because Bethlehem Haven is part of the Pittsburgh Mercy system, which here in Allegheny County, Pittsburgh Mercy is one of the largest providers of behavioral health services for underserved and at-risk individuals through their many residential and other programs. We've started the discussions to say we're challenged to get our homeless individuals connected to behavioral health services in a seamless and efficient way. So we started to talk about what are the barriers? Can we start to do more brief interventions and assessments here within our programs? And then by doing those assessments, we can more effectively work with and partner with the behavioral health providers on the Pittsburgh Mercy side, for example. So those are just some suggestions that I think, again, we would love to really replicate on a more, on a larger scale. So, as we learn, we can scale these things. So I would just comment that those are some vehicles and ways to do it as well. I think we have, I think that's, the second question is just quickly, what do you think is the single most important aspect to focus on in improving the services that we provide our individuals? Maitri, Marcella, myself. I'll quickly say it's this integration model, but go ahead.
So I would definitely say integration, but I keep going back to looking at every person individually.
Yeah.
Looking at every person individually and focusing on their strengths, what they perceive, and kind of getting our stuff out of the way.
Yeah, put our baggage outside the door, right, Maitri? That's a great point. Yeah. Well, we have 1 minute left. I don't know if we have, well, thank you. Steph shared from the Housing Alliance, shared some comments about some of the participants in our conversational panel could feel our passion I'll tell you what, the three of us certainly felt it. We did not know each other before we put this together. And I'm telling you, we could meet every week and talk about these things. So thank you for those very kind comments. And with that, I will thank Maitri and Marcella and say what a privilege it was to be with all of you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, Annette. Thanks,
I definitely say
Marcella.
ditto.
Thank you.
Thank you.